The champagne bubbles tickled Ava's nose as she scrolled through social media, a bittersweet smile playing on her lips. Her ex-husband Richard, a man who once scoffed at her dreams and belittled her ambitions, was now plastering his engagement photos all over Instagram. His new fiancée, a stunning blonde named Brittany, dripped in diamonds and radiated an almost unsettling level of smugness. Ava, meanwhile, was still piecing together her life after their acrimonious split, working long hours as a freelance graphic designer. Little did Richard and Brittany know, as they preened for the cameras, that fate was about to deliver a twist so monumental, so utterly unbelievable it would shatter their carefully constructed facade of happiness and catapult Ava into a world beyond their wildest imaginations. A phone call, a name she barely recognized, and a revelation that would change everything, forever. Ava's modest apartment, usually a sanctuary of creativity, with its scattered sketches and vibrant mood boards, felt suffocating that evening. Richard's engagement announcement had landed like a punch to the gut, stirring up a cocktail of resentment and lingering hurt she thought she had long since processed. They had been together for 8 years, married for 5, and his sudden departure for a younger woman had left her feeling discarded and undervalued. Brittany, with her perfectly sculpted features and an air of effortless wealth, seemed to embody everything Ava wasn't, or at least everything Richard now apparently desired. As Ava stared at the flawless images, Richard beaming Brittany's hand prominently displaying a colossal engagement ring, her phone buzzed, pulling her from her self-pity. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. Hesitantly, she answered. "Hello, Miss Ava." Ava Sterling, a crisp, formal voice inquired. "Speaking. My name is Mr. Jonathan Albright, and I'm a senior partner at Albright and Stern Attorneys at Law. I'm calling regarding the estate of Mr. Charles Blackwood." Ava frowned. The name was vaguely familiar, a philanthropic billionaire who had recently passed away, his death making headlines due to his extensive charitable work. She couldn't fathom why his lawyers would be contacting her. "I'm sorry, Mr. Albright, but I don't believe I ever met Mr. Blackwood," Ava replied, a knot of confusion tightening in her stomach. There was a brief pause on the other end. "That is unexpected. Mr. Blackwood named you specifically in his will, Ms. Sterling. He has bequeathed to you the majority of his estate." Ava's hand trembled, and she almost dropped her phone. I don't understand. There must be some mistake. I assure you, Ms. Sterling, there is no mistake. We have conducted thorough due diligence. Mr. Blackwood left detailed instructions. We would like to schedule a meeting at your earliest convenience to discuss the details. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. A billionaire's fortune. To her, it was utterly surreal, like a plotline from a melodramatic movie. She managed to stammer out an agreement to meet the following morning, her mind reeling with disbelief. As she hung up, her gaze fell back on Richard and Brittany's beaming faces on her phone screen. A strange sense of detached amusement flickered within her. Their perfect little world was about to get a whole lot more complicated. Sleep evaded Ava that night. Her mind raced, trying to piece together any possible connection to Charles Blackwood. She racked her brain, searching for a forgotten encounter, a chance meeting. Nothing. The name remained stubbornly unfamiliar. The sheer improbability of the situation was overwhelming. Could this be some elaborate prank? A cruel twist of fate? Yet the lawyer's voice had been so professional, so matter-of-fact. The following morning, dressed in the most presentable outfit she owned, Ava found herself in the opulent waiting room of Albright and Stern. The hushed atmosphere, the rich mahogany furniture, and the discreetly dressed staff all spoke of wealth and power. A nervous flutter danced in her stomach. Mr. Albright, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes, greeted her warmly and led her to a spacious office overlooking the city. He presented her with documents thick and filled with legal jargon confirming the unbelievable truth. Charles Blackwood, a man she had never knowingly met, had indeed left her the bulk of his multi-billion-dollar fortune. Ms. Sterling, Mr. Albright began, his tone gentle. Mr. Blackwood was a very private man. His will is quite specific, but he did not elaborate on the reasons for this particular bequest. We understand this must come as a shock. Shock was an understatement. Ava felt like she was living in a dream, a bizarre, unbelievable dream. I just don't understand why me, she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. We have explored every possibility, Ms. Sterling. Our investigation has revealed no familial connection, no business dealings. It remains a mystery to us as well. As Mr. Albright outlined the extent of her inheritance, a sprawling real estate portfolio, significant holdings in various companies, and a substantial amount of liquid assets. Ava's head swam. It was more money than she could ever have imagined, a life-altering sum that would forever change the trajectory of her existence. Leaving the law firm in a daze, Ava clutched the documents in her hand, the weight of them feeling both literal and metaphorical. The city lights seemed to blur around her, the sounds of traffic fading into a distant hum. Her first instinct was to call her best friend Olivia, but she hesitated. How could she possibly explain this? It sounded so outlandish, so utterly impossible. As she walked, her thoughts drifted back to Richard. The petty sting of his public display of happiness now seemed insignificant in the face of this monumental revelation. A wry smile touched her lips. He thought he had traded up. He had no idea. Olivia's reaction when Ava finally managed to articulate the unbelievable news was a mixture of stunned silence and ecstatic disbelief. "Are you serious, Ava? A billionaire? You? This is insane." Over celebratory takeout, Olivia peppered Ava with questions, her eyes wide with excitement. "But did you ever meet him? Did you do something heroic and forget about it?" Ava could only shake her head, still grappling with the sheer improbability of it all. "I have absolutely no idea, Liv. It's like something out of a movie." The news of Ava's inheritance, despite her attempts at discretion, inevitably began to leak. The local news outlets picked up the story initially, focusing on the mystery surrounding the unknown beneficiary of Charles Blackwood's vast fortune. Soon Ava's name and picture were plastered across newspapers and online articles. Richard, initially oblivious, stumbled upon the news during a lunch meeting with Brittany. His face paled as he read the headline, "Local Woman Inherits Billionaire's Estate." The accompanying photo, a slightly older picture of Ava, was unmistakable. He clicked on the article, his heart pounding in his chest, and the details of her staggering inheritance swam before his eyes. Brittany, perched across the table, noticed his sudden change in demeanor. "What is it, darling? You look like you've seen a ghost." Richard could only stammer, It's Ava." Brittany's perfectly manicured eyebrows arched in disdain. "Your ex-wife? What about her? She just inherited billions." The words felt foreign and unbelievable even as he spoke them. A stunned silence descended upon the table. Brittany's initial disbelief quickly morphed into a look of calculating curiosity. The woman, Richard had discarded the woman she had perceived as an insignificant shadow of her own glamorous existence, was now one of the wealthiest people in the world. The news sent shockwaves through Richard's social circle. The friends who had subtly sided with him after the divorce, whispering about Ava's perceived shortcomings, now spoke of her in hushed, awestruck tones. The invitations to exclusive parties, which had dwindled for Ava after her separation, suddenly began to reappear. Richard, fueled by a potent mix of disbelief and regret, found himself obsessively checking Ava's social media, which had suddenly become a magnet for new followers and media attention. He saw the paparazzi shots of her leaving the law firm, her face a mask of bewildered composure. He saw the speculation swirling online, the theories ranging from a secret past relationship with Blackwood to a case of mistaken identity. He tried to rationalize it, to find some logical explanation for this unbelievable turn of events. Perhaps she had known Blackwood through some obscure charity work. Perhaps there was a distant familial connection they were unaware of. But deep down, a gnawing feeling of foolishness began to take root. He had been so quick to dismiss Ava, so certain of his upgrade, and now she was living a life of unimaginable wealth, while he was still navigating the complexities of a new relationship and the pressures of his moderately successful career. Brittany, ever the pragmatist, saw an opportunity. While Richard stewed in his regret, she began to subtly probe for information about Ava. She feigned sympathy when speaking to mutual acquaintances, all the while carefully gathering details about Ava's newfound status and her plans. Ava, meanwhile, was trying to navigate her new reality with a sense of cautious optimism. She hired a financial advisor, a sharp and discreet woman named Vivian, who began the daunting task of managing her newfound wealth. Vivian guided her through the legal and financial complexities, offering sound advice and a much-needed sense of stability in the midst of the chaos. One afternoon, as Ava was discussing investment strategies with Vivian, her phone rang. It was Richard. Hesitantly, she answered. "Ava." "It's Richard." His voice sounded strained, almost nervous. "Richard?" she replied, her tone cool and neutral. I heard the news about Mr. Blackwood." "Yes." There was an awkward silence. Ava could almost hear the wheels turning in his mind. I wanted to say congratulations," he finally said, the words sounding hollow. "Thank you, Richard. It must be, quite a shock." "It is." Another silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words and buried regrets. Perhaps we could meet for coffee sometime." Richard ventured, his tone now laced with a hint of desperation. "Just to catch up." Ava hesitated for a moment. A part of her, the part that still remembered the sting of his betrayal, wanted to hang up. But another part, the part that had always strived for grace and composure, decided on a different approach. "I'm quite busy at the moment, Richard," she said calmly. "But thank you for the offer." She ended the call, a sense of quiet satisfaction washing over her. The tables had turned, and while she hadn't sought revenge, the universe had a funny way of delivering its own brand of justice. Brittany, witnessing Richard's increasingly frequent and agitated phone calls, didn't need to be a mind reader to understand his preoccupation. Ava's inheritance had cast a long shadow over their seemingly perfect relationship, exposing a raw nerve of insecurity and regret in Richard. Determined to maintain her position and perhaps even capitalize on this unexpected development, Brittany decided to take matters into her own hands. She subtly began researching Charles Blackwood, hoping to uncover any connection between him and Ava that might shed light on this extraordinary bequest. Her initial inquiries yielded nothing. Blackwood's life had been meticulously private, his philanthropic endeavors well documented, but his personal relationships remained shrouded in secrecy. Undeterred, Brittany shifted her focus to Ava. She scrolled through Ava's social media, meticulously analyzing every post, every tagged photo, searching for any clue, any hint of a connection to the late billionaire. She even contacted some of Ava's distant acquaintances, feigning interest in catching up, her real motive being to glean any information about Ava's past. One afternoon, while having lunch with a mutual friend, Carol Brittany casually steered the conversation towards Ava. "It's just unbelievable about Ava, isn't it?" she said, her tone carefully modulated to sound sympathetic. "I always thought she was such a sweet girl. It's hard to imagine where she would have met someone like Charles Blackwood." Carol, a kind but somewhat gossipy woman, shrugged. "Honestly, Brittany, no one knows. It's the talk of the town. Some people are saying she must have been his secret lover. Others think it's a mistake in the will." Brittany listened intently, filing away every piece of information, no matter how seemingly insignificant. She learned about Ava's quiet life, her dedication to her graphic design work, her close friendship with Olivia, and her relatively uneventful dating history post-divorce. There was no mention of any significant relationship with an older, wealthy man. Frustrated by the lack of concrete information, Brittany decided on a more direct approach. She concocted a plausible reason to reach out to Ava, hoping to gauge the situation firsthand. Using a generic email address, she sent Ava a message expressing admiration for her design work and inquiring about potential collaborations. Ava, now accustomed to a barrage of messages from well-wishers and opportunistic individuals, almost dismissed the email. But something about the polite and professional tone caught her attention. After a brief internal debate, she decided to respond, albeit cautiously. A few email exchanges followed, with Brittany carefully steering the conversation towards more personal topics, subtly probing for details about Ava's past. Ava, however, remained guarded, offering polite but vague responses. Realizing that her attempts at indirect infiltration were proving futile, Brittany decided to escalate her tactics. She confided in Richard, painting a picture of concern for Ava's well-being. "Darling," she said, her voice laced with feigned worry, "don't you think it's strange? This enormous inheritance, and no one seems to know why. What if Ava is being taken advantage of? What if there's something sinister going on?" Richard, still smarting from his own foolishness, and now viewing Ava's newfound wealth with a mixture of awe and suspicion, was more receptive to Brittany's insinuations. "I don't know, Britt. It does seem a bit odd. Perhaps you should reach out to her again," Brittany suggested, her eyes gleaming with a calculated glint. "Just as a friend. See if she's okay. You were married to her for years, Richard. You still care about her, don't you?" Richard, eager to appear magnanimous and perhaps hoping for a glimpse into Ava's new life, agreed. He sent Ava another message, this time expressing concern and offering his support. Ava, wary of Richard's sudden interest, replied with a polite but firm message assuring him that she was well and had a strong support system in place. Brittany, witnessing Richard's continued attempts to contact Ava, realized that her fiancé's lingering connection to his ex-wife could jeopardize her own plans. She decided that a more direct confrontation was necessary. She managed to obtain Ava's phone number through a mutual acquaintance and, taking a deep breath, dialed the number. Ava answered on the third ring. "Hello, Ava. It's Brittany, Richard's fiancée." Brittany's voice was saccharine sweet, a stark contrast to the steel in her eyes. Ava's heart sank. She had hoped to avoid any direct interaction with Richard's new partner. "Brittany, what can I do for you? I just wanted to reach out and congratulate you on your incredible fortune," Brittany said, the insincerity dripping from her tone. "It's truly remarkable." "Thank you," Ava replied curtly, eager to end the conversation. "I was just wondering," Brittany continued, her voice taking on a more inquisitive edge, "how you knew Mr. Blackwood. Richard and I were quite surprised by the news." Ava hesitated for a moment. She owed Brittany no explanation, but a part of her felt a strange desire to disrupt the other woman's carefully constructed sense of superiority. "That's a personal matter," Ava said coolly, "but I appreciate your curiosity." Brittany's cheerful facade wavered for a fraction of a second. "Of course. Well, I just wanted to say that if you ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. Richard and I would be happy to help in any way we can." The offer hung in the air, thick with thinly veiled, ulterior motives. Ava simply replied, "Thank you, I'll keep that in mind." She ended the call, a sense of unease settling over her. Brittany's sudden interest was unsettling, and she had a feeling that this was far from over. As Ava navigated the initial whirlwind of managing her inheritance, she couldn't shake the persistent question of why Charles Blackwood had chosen her. The mystery gnawed at her, a loose thread in the otherwise neatly woven tapestry of her life. Driven by a need for answers, Ava instructed Vivian to commission a discreet and thorough investigation into Charles Blackwood's past. She wanted to know everything about him: his family, his relationships, his philanthropic work, any connection, however tenuous, to her own life. The investigation unfolded slowly, revealing a portrait of a complex and enigmatic man. Charles Blackwood had been a self-made billionaire known for his shrewd business acumen and his profound commitment to charitable causes. He had never married and had no known living relatives. His personal life had been fiercely guarded, leaving little room for speculation or gossip. Weeks turned into months, and still no discernible link between Ava and Charles Blackwood emerged. The investigators delved deeper, sifting through old records, interviewing former associates, and tracing Blackwood's activities over the past several decades. One day, Vivian called Ava with a breakthrough. Ava, I think we might have found something. Ava's heart quickened with anticipation. What is it? Our investigators uncovered a connection to a charity organization that your mother was involved with many years ago. It was a small local initiative focused on supporting underprivileged children. Ava's mind raced. Her mother, Sarah, had always had a strong sense of social justice and had dedicated a significant portion of her time to various charitable causes. But Ava had only vague recollections of this particular organization. Tell me more, Vivian. The organization was called Bright Futures. It was active for about 5 years in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Charles Blackwood was a significant, though anonymous, donor during that time. Your mother served on the board of directors. A flicker of recognition sparked in Ava's memory. She vaguely remembered her mother attending meetings, organizing fundraising events. Could this be the connection? Vivian continued. We found records indicating that Mr. Blackwood took a particular interest in one of the children supported by Bright Futures. A young girl named Anya Petrova. Anya Petrova. The name struck a chord deep within Ava. It sounded familiar, yet she couldn't quite place it. Our investigators managed to track down some old photographs from the charity events, Vivian said. There's one picture of your mother with a group of children. And in the background, there's a man who bears a striking resemblance to a younger Charles Blackwood talking to a little girl. The girl, her name tag clearly reads Anya. Ava asked Vivian to send her the photograph immediately. When she saw it, a wave of emotion washed over her. There was her mother, her face radiant with purpose, surrounded by a group of smiling children. And in the background, a younger, less weathered version of Charles Blackwood was indeed kneeling beside a small girl with dark, expressive eyes. The girl, Anya. As Ava studied the photograph more closely, something else caught her eye. A small, almost imperceptible detail. A silver locket around Anya's neck. It was identical to one that Ava herself had owned as a child, a gift from her mother. Suddenly, fragmented memories began to surface. Snippets of conversations, fleeting images. Her mother talking about a special little girl she was particularly fond of. A story about a difficult family situation. A promise made. Ava remembered a time when her mother had seemed particularly preoccupied, making frequent phone calls in hushed tones. She had spoken of wanting to help a child in need to ensure she had a brighter future. The pieces began to fall into place, creating a picture that was both heartbreaking and profound. Anya Petrova. Could it be that she was somehow connected to Charles Blackwood? And what role had Ava's mother played in their lives? Driven by a newfound sense of urgency, Ava asked Vivian to delve deeper into Anya Petrova's story. The investigation revealed a tragic tale. Anya's family had been struggling with severe financial hardship. Her mother was ill, and her father had abandoned them. Ava's mother, through Bright Futures, and with the support of Charles Blackwood, had become a lifeline for Anya, providing financial assistance and emotional support. Tragically, Anya's mother had succumbed to her illness a few years later. Charles Blackwood, deeply moved by Anya's plight, and perhaps feeling a sense of responsibility, had quietly taken her under his wing, ensuring she received a good education and the opportunities she deserved, all while maintaining a discreet distance to protect her privacy. As Ava absorbed these details, a profound realization dawned on her. Her mother, in her quiet and selfless way, had touched the life of this little girl, had offered her hope in a time of darkness. And Charles Blackwood, witnessing her compassion, and perhaps feeling a connection to the child her kindness had embraced, had never forgotten her. Could it be that the inheritance was not for Ava herself, but a way for Charles Blackwood to honor the memory of her mother and continue her legacy of kindness? It seemed the most plausible explanation, a testament to the enduring power of human connection and the unexpected ways in which good deeds can ripple through time. The photograph of her mother with Anya, with Charles Blackwood, watching over them in the background, became a cherished possession for Ava, a tangible link to a past she had only vaguely known and a profound understanding of the woman her mother truly was. The mystery of the inheritance hadn't been solved in the way she had initially imagined, but the truth she had uncovered was far more meaningful. Armed with the knowledge of her mother's connection to Anya Petrova, and by extension to Charles Blackwood, Ava felt a sense of clarity and purpose she hadn't experienced since the inheritance. The weight of the unknown had lifted, replaced by a profound understanding of the legacy she had unknowingly inherited. Meanwhile, Richard's curiosity about Ava's newfound wealth had morphed into an almost obsessive preoccupation. He found himself constantly checking online news articles and social media for any updates on her life. Brittany's attempts to steer his attention back to their wedding plans were met with distracted nods and vague agreements. One evening, after Richard had spent an unusually long time scrolling through his phone, Brittany finally snapped. "Richard, what are you doing? We have a caterer to finalize and you're glued to your phone." Richard looked up, his expression sheepish. "Sorry, Britt. I was just seeing if there were any updates on Ava." Brittany's eyes narrowed. "Why are you so obsessed with your ex-wife? She inherited a fortune. Good for her. Can we please focus on our own lives? It's unbelievable, that's all," Richard mumbled, turning back to his phone. Brittany's frustration reached its breaking point. She knew she needed to regain control of the situation. She decided to pay Ava a visit, hoping to glean some information and perhaps even subtly undermine her newfound confidence. Ava was at home reviewing some documents with Vivian when her doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. Frowning, she went to the door and peered through the peephole. It was Brittany. A wave of annoyance washed over Ava. She had no desire to engage with Richard's manipulative fiancée. But before she could decide not to answer, Brittany rang the bell again, more insistently this time. Sighing, Ava opened the door. "Brittany, what do you want?" Brittany plastered on a saccharine smile. "Ava, so lovely to see you. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop in to see how you're doing." Ava raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "I'm doing fine, Brittany. Thank you for your concern. Of course, Richard and I have been so worried about you. All this sudden attention must be overwhelming." Brittany's eyes scanned Ava's apartment, taking in the tasteful but understated decor. There was no hint of the extravagant spending one might expect from a new billionaire. "I'm managing," Ava said coolly, stepping back slightly to discourage Brittany from entering. But Brittany was already stepping inside. "Oh, please let me in for a moment. I just wanted to have a proper chat." Reluctantly, Ava allowed her in. Brittany strolled around the living room, her gaze lingering on a framed photograph of Ava and her mother. "That's your mother, isn't it?" Brittany said, picking up the photo. "Richard mentioned she was a lovely woman." "Yes, she was," Ava replied, her tone hardening slightly. "It's just so incredible about the inheritance," Brittany continued, placing the photo back on the table. "Richard and I were trying to figure out how you knew Mr. Blackwood. We couldn't recall you ever mentioning him." Ava crossed her arms, her patience wearing thin. "As I said before, Brittany, that's a personal matter." Brittany chuckled lightly. Of course. But you must admit it's quite a story. A struggling graphic designer suddenly inherits billions. It sounds like something out of a fairy tale." There was a subtle undercurrent of skepticism in her voice. "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns," Ava replied evenly. Brittany's smile tightened. "It certainly does. And I'm sure Richard is just thrilled for you. He always said you were a lucky woman. Ava met Brittany's gaze, her own unwavering. Is that why he left me? Brittany. Because I was so lucky. A flicker of discomfort crossed Brittany's face, but she quickly recovered. Oh, Ava, you know how Richard can be. Impulsive. But he's so happy now. We're so happy together. She held up her hand, the enormous diamond ring sparkling under the light. Ava's gaze flickered to the ring, then back to Brittany's carefully composed face. I'm glad to hear that, Brittany. We were just wondering. Brittany continued, her tone shifting again, becoming more probing, if you had any plans for all that money. Will you be traveling the world? Buying a yacht? It must be so exciting. Ava chose her words carefully. I'm still figuring things out, but I intend to use the inheritance responsibly. Responsibly? Brittany echoed, a hint of derision in her voice. Well, I'm sure Richard would be happy to offer you some advice. He's always been good with finances. I have excellent financial advisors. Thank you, Ava replied, her voice sharp. Brittany's smile finally dropped. Look, Ava, let's be honest. This whole thing is a bit strange, isn't it? A billionaire leaving his entire fortune to someone he barely knew. There must be more to the story. Perhaps there is, Ava said calmly. But it's none of your business, Brittany. Brittany's eyes flashed with anger. It is my business when it's all anyone is talking about. It's making Richard feel uncomfortable. Perhaps Richard should focus on his upcoming wedding and his own happiness rather than dwelling on my affairs. Ava retorted, her patience finally exhausted. Brittany took a step closer, her voice dropping to a low, venomous whisper. You think you're so clever now, don't you? Suddenly rich, suddenly important. But you're still the same. Ava, Richard left. Don't think for a second that this money changes who you are. Ava met Brittany's angry gaze without flinching. It doesn't change who I am, Brittany, but it certainly changes what I can do. She opened the door, gesturing for Brittany to leave. Brittany stood for a moment, her face contorted with fury, before flouncing out her expensive heels, clicking sharply on the hallway floor. As Ava closed the door, she felt a surge of relief. The confrontation had been unpleasant, but it had also solidified her resolve. She wouldn't be intimidated by Brittany's petty jealousy or Richard's lingering regrets. She had a new path to forge, a path guided by her own values and the unexpected legacy of her mother's kindness. The months following Brittany's unwelcome visit were a period of profound transformation for Ava. The initial shock of her inheritance had subsided, replaced by a quiet, determined sense of purpose. She knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that this fortune was not meant for yachts or frivolous luxuries. It was a legacy, a responsibility, and a chance to amplify the kindness her mother had embodied throughout her life. Working tirelessly with Vivian and a newly assembled board of compassionate experts, Ava brought her vision to life. They established the Sarah's Light Foundation, a name that felt both personal and evocative of its mission to illuminate the paths of underprivileged children through education, healthcare, and access to the arts. This was not a hands-off operation for Ava. She poured her heart into it, leveraging her own skills as a graphic designer to create the foundation's branding, ensuring every element reflected the warmth and hope she wanted it to represent. She spent her days in meetings, not with fawning socialites, but with dedicated social workers and educators. She visited community centers, her designer shoes treading on worn linoleum floors, and listened to the stories of the families she aimed to help. One of the foundation's first major projects was the revitalization of a dilapidated community center in a neglected part of the city. They didn't just write a check. They funded a complete overhaul, creating a state-of-the-art library, a vibrant arts and crafts studio, and a technology lab filled with new computers. Ava was there for the grand reopening, not as a distant benefactor, demanding applause, but as a volunteer, helping children log onto the computers for the first time. The look of wonder in a young girl's eyes as she discovered a digital painting program filled Ava with a joy more profound than any amount of money could buy. She was building something real, something that would outlast her, just as her mother's quiet acts of kindness had outlasted her own life. While Ava was building a legacy, Richard and Brittany were watching their own carefully constructed world crumble. The colossal fortune that had unexpectedly entered their orbit had become a toxic presence in their relationship, an invisible third party that highlighted every crack in their foundation. Richard's obsession with Ava's new life grew with each passing day. He'd spend hours scrolling through news articles and charity websites tracking the progress of the Sarah's Light Foundation. He saw photos of Ava cutting ribbons, speaking with city officials, looking poised, confident, and radiant in a way he hadn't seen in years. The tension came to a head one crisp autumn evening. Brittany emerged from their bedroom, a vision in a sapphire blue gown, ready for a high-profile gallery opening they were meant to attend. She found Richard in the living room, still in his work clothes, his gaze fixed on the glowing screen of his tablet. "Richard, we're going to be late," she said, her voice tight with annoyance. "The car is waiting. 1 second, Britt." He mumbled, his eyes still glued to the screen. "Did you see this? Ava's foundation just pledged $1 million to the Children's Hospital. $1 million. There was an undeniable note of awe in his voice that grated on Brittany's nerves. Brittany walked over and stood between him and the tablet, her arms crossed. "Is your ex-wife's philanthropy more important than the event I have been planning for us to attend for weeks? This is a major networking opportunity for my brand." Richard finally looked up, his expression defensive. "It's not about that. It's just incredible. The things she's doing, I never would have thought." "You never would have thought what?" Brittany snapped, her voice rising. "That the boring little woman you left had it in her? Or are you just thinking about all that money you walked away from?" "That's not fair," Richard shot back, standing up. "I'm just saying she's changed. She's important now." The word hung in the air between them, heavy and sharp. Important. It was the one thing Brittany had always believed she was, and Ava was not. And we're not. Brittany's voice was dangerously low. "Is our life, our future, not important? All you do is talk about her, think about her. It's pathetic, Richard. It's like you're haunted by the ghost of a woman who is very much alive and, frankly, seems to have completely forgotten you exist. Maybe you should have thought about how important she was before you threw it all away for me." The last words were laced with a venomous insecurity. She had won him, but it was becoming terrifyingly clear that she hadn't won the prize she thought he was. Richard had no answer. He just stared at her, the gulf between them wider than ever. The gallery opening was forgotten. The evening ended in a cold, resentful silence. The opulent apartment feeling less like a home and more like a beautifully decorated cage. Ava, blissfully unaware of the drama she was inadvertently causing, was rediscovering herself. She moved into a spacious but not ostentatious penthouse apartment with a terrace that overlooked the city, and in one sun-drenched room, she set up the art studio she had always dreamed of. For the first time in a decade, she painted not for a client or a deadline, but for the sheer joy of it, the smell of turpentine and oil paints becoming a comforting balm to her soul. She hosted small dinner parties for Olivia and her old friends, the ones who had stuck by her when she had nothing. Their laughter filled her new home, and they all remarked on the change in her. The hesitant, bruised woman who had emerged from a painful divorce was gone, replaced by a confident, serene woman who was comfortable in her own skin. One quiet evening, while sketching in her studio with soft music playing in the background, a notification pinged on her laptop. It was an email with a subject line that made her pause. "A connection to your mother, Sarah, and Charles Blackwood." Her heart skipped a beat. The sender's name was Anya Petrova. With a trembling hand, she clicked it open. The email was beautifully written, eloquent and heartfelt. Anya introduced herself and gently explained her connection to Bright Futures and to Charles. She wrote of the profound impact Ava's mother had on her life, calling her a guardian angel. She then expressed her deep, lifelong gratitude to Charles Blackwood, describing him not as a reclusive billionaire, but as a kind, protective, and deeply private benefactor. He spoke of your mother often, Anya wrote. He held her in the highest esteem. I believe he saw a kindred spirit in her. Now that he has passed, I feel there are things you should know, stories only I can share, that might help you understand the true depth of his gift. If you would be willing, I would be honored to meet with you and tell you in person. Ava read the email 3 times, tears blurring the words on the screen. This was it. This was the human connection she had been searching for, the key to unlocking the central mystery of her new life. This went beyond legal documents and financial statements. This was about the heart of the matter. Without a moment's hesitation, she began to type her reply, a sense of profound anticipation washing over her. She was on the verge of not just understanding her inheritance, but of understanding a part of her mother's life she had never known. A new beginning had led her to the precipice of an old hidden story, and she was more than ready to hear it. The late autumn sun cast a warm golden glow through the large windows of the Gilded Spoon, a quiet, elegant bistro Ava had chosen for their meeting. It felt appropriately serene for a conversation that carried the weight of unspoken history. Ava had arrived early, her hands clasped around a warm mug of tea, a nervous energy thrumming just beneath her calm exterior. She had replayed this moment in her mind 100 times, wondering what Anya would be like, what secrets of Charles Blackwood's life she might hold. When Anya walked in, Ava knew her instantly. She had the same dark, expressive eyes from the photograph, though they were now framed by the wisdom and warmth of a woman who had lived a full life. She moved with a gentle confidence, her smile genuine as she spotted Ava and made her way to the table. Ava, I'm Anya. It's so wonderful to finally meet you, Ava said, standing to greet her. The handshake turned into a brief, warm hug, a spontaneous gesture that seemed to dissolve any initial awkwardness. The connection was immediate, a strange and comforting sense of familiarity bridging the gap of their unknown shared past. They started with the easy topics: Anya's work as a beloved history teacher, her 2 grown children, her quiet life in a suburban town not far from the city. Ava in turn spoke of her passion for graphic design and the whirlwind of the past few months, carefully omitting the more chaotic details involving Richard and Brittany. Their conversation flowed not like one between strangers, but like one between old friends catching up after a long time apart. Inevitably, the talk turned to the 2 people who connected them across time, her mother Sarah and Charles Blackwood. Your mother Anya, began, her eyes softening with a distant fondness, was a force of nature. So gentle, yet so determined. I was just a little girl, lost and scared, and she was a light. She never treated me like a charity case. She'd bring me books, sit with me for hours, helping with my homework. She saw a person, not a project. Ava felt a swell of pride and a familiar ache of loss for the mother she missed so dearly. She always had a way of seeing the best in people. I remember her spending countless evenings working on things for bright futures, and it was her passion. It was more than that, Anya said, leaning forward slightly. It was a lifeline. For me, and I think in a way for Charles too. She paused, taking a sip of water. He never visited the charity centres himself, not openly. He insisted on anonymity. But he would ask me about your mother. He wanted to know everything she was doing, every child she helped. He admired her spirit more than I can possibly say. Anya's gaze became more intense, her voice lowering as if sharing a profound secret. He once told me that her compassion reminded him of someone he had lost, someone very dear to him, from his past. He said it was like seeing a ghost, but in the most beautiful way imaginable. This was it, the edge of the mystery. Ava's heart quickened. Did he ever say who it was? Anya looked down at her hands, a flicker of old sadness in her expression. It was his sister. He lost her when they were both very young adults. They were incredibly close, inseparable as children. He carried that loss with him his entire life. It was a wound that never truly healed. Ava listened captivated. The portrait of the stoic private billionaire was cracking, revealing the grieving brother beneath. She was beginning to understand the man, not just the name on a legal document. He told me your mother had the same fire in her soul. Anya continued. The same unwavering belief in doing good, the same quiet strength. It fascinated him. He felt a connection to her, even from a distance. It was why he supported Bright Futures so generously. He was in his own way supporting the spirit of his sister. Anya reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet pouch. From it, she carefully extracted the silver locket, its surface worn smooth with time. She held it in her palm for Ava to see. It was identical to the one Ava remembered from her childhood. He gave this to me on my 10th birthday, Anya said softly. He told me it was a replica of one that had belonged to his sister. He said it was a symbol of hope and protection, a reminder that even when things seem dark, there is always kindness in the world. Ava stared at the locket, the pieces of the puzzle swirling in her mind, not yet fitting together, but growing closer. His sister. Did he ever tell you her name? Anya met her gaze, her dark eyes holding a world of unspoken meaning. Yes, her name was Sarah. The name landed in the quiet bistro with the force of a thunderclap. Sarah. Ava's breath caught in her throat. Her mother's name. It couldn't be a coincidence. The world seemed to tilt, the muted chatter of the other patrons fading into a distant hum. A coincidence of that magnitude felt impossible, a statistical anomaly that defied logic. My mother's name was Sarah Ava, managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. Anya's expression didn't register surprise. Instead, it was one of gentle confirmation, as if she had been waiting for Ava to make this very connection. I know, dear. Charles knew too. It was the first thing that drew him to her file at the charity. The name. It was what made him look closer. A torrent of fragmented memories rushed through Ava's mind. Old stories her grandmother used to tell, whispers of family from long ago. Relatives who had moved away, letters that had stopped coming. She remembered her mother's old leather-bound photo albums tucked away in a cedar chest in the attic. She hadn't looked through them in years, not since her mother had passed. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone, her heart pounding against her ribs. She navigated to the cloud storage where she had painstakingly digitized all the old family photos years ago, a project she'd undertaken to preserve them. She scrolled rapidly through folders that labeled childhood, holidays, grandparents. Finally, she found it, an album titled Mom's Early Years. Her fingers flew across the screen, swiping past faded black and white images of her mother as a baby, a schoolgirl, a teenager. And then she saw it. The photograph. It was sepia-toned, the edges slightly frayed in the digital scan. It showed a young woman with a luminous smile and eyes that held the same spark as the billionaire in the newspapers, standing proudly next to a handsome, dark-haired young man. The woman's resemblance to Charles Blackwood was undeniable. They shared the same strong jawline, the same intelligent gaze. On the back of the original print, in her grandmother's elegant cursive, were the words, Sorrel and Thomas on their engagement day, 1960. So much love. Without a word, Ava turned the phone around and showed the screen to Anya. Anya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the image. Oh my goodness, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. That's them. That is Sarah Blackwood. And Thomas. Thomas Sterling. Your grandparents. She looked up at Ava, her face a mixture of awe and joyous disbelief. Charles looked for them for years, for decades. The final piece of the puzzle slammed into place, and the full breathtaking picture was revealed. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just an admiration for her mother's spirit. Charles Blackwood, the enigmatic billionaire, was not just a benefactor. He was her uncle. Her mother, Sarah Sterling, was his long-lost sister. Anya, seeing the shock and confusion on Ava's face, began to fill in the gaps, relaying the story, as Charles had told it to her over many years. They were orphaned young, she explained. They only had each other, but they were ambitious. Charles wanted to build an empire. Your mother, Sarah, fell in love with Thomas Sterling, a kind man with dreams of a quiet life as a university professor. After they married, Thomas was offered a position at a university on the other side of the country. It was a huge opportunity. She described the painful farewell at the train station. There had been no fight, no dramatic fallout, just a simple, sad drifting apart, a consequence of geography and an era before instant communication. They promised to write, Anya said, and they did for a while. But Charles was working relentlessly, moving from city to city, chasing deals. Your grandparents were starting a family. Letters got lost. Addresses changed. Life, as it often does, got in the way. By the time Charles had built his fortune and had the resources to truly search, years had passed. The trail had gone cold. He hired private investigators, but they could find nothing. He never knew he had a niece. The revelation washed over Ava in waves. Shock, disbelief, a profound, aching sadness for the lost years, for the family connection her mother never knew she had. Her mother had lived her entire adult life believing her only brother was lost to her, perhaps gone forever. And Charles had lived his a colossally wealthy and powerful man, utterly alone, believing his only family was a ghost in a photograph. So when he found your mother through the charity, Ava trailed off, the implication dawning on her. He was overjoyed and terrified, Anya confirmed. He had found his sister's legacy. He saw you in the file too, her daughter, his niece. He wanted to reach out to reconnect, but so much time had passed. He was afraid of being seen as a stranger trying to buy his way back into a family he'd lost. He was filled with regret, with a sense of failure for not having tried harder sooner. So he watched from a distance. He made sure you and your mother were always safe, always provided for in subtle ways you would never notice. And he decided that when he was gone, he would give you everything. It wasn't just a gift, Ava. It was an apology. It was a homecoming. Tears streamed down Ava's face, not of sadness, but of a deep, resonant understanding. The inheritance wasn't a random act of fate. It was a bridge across a chasm of lost decades. It was a story of love loss and reunion written in the language of a last will and testament. She looked at Anya, whose own eyes were shining with tears. This woman wasn't just a link to the past. She was a keeper of secrets, a trusted confidant to a lonely man, and now a cherished part of Ava's own story. Ava reached across the table and took Anya's hand. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for telling me." They sat in silence for a long moment, two women in a sunlit bistro connected by the invisible threads of family and history. The flaunting of an ex-husband and the petty dramas of her former life seemed utterly insignificant now, like distant echoes from another lifetime. Ava's journey had led her not just to a billion-dollar fortune, but to something far more valuable, the discovery of who she was and where she came from. She looked at the photograph on her phone, at the smiling faces of the young couple who were her grandparents, and felt the presence of her mother and the uncle she never knew. Their story was no longer lost, and her own was just beginning. And so Ava's life took a turn no one could have predicted. From the sting of her ex-husband's public happiness to the bewildering shock of inheriting a billionaire's fortune. Her journey was a testament to the unpredictable nature of life and the enduring power of human connection. The flaunting of Richard and Brittany ultimately became a footnote in Ava's extraordinary story, a catalyst that propelled her towards a future filled with purpose, philanthropy, and the unexpected discovery of family. What do you think of Ava's incredible journey? Were you surprised by the final twist? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this dramatic storytelling, please give this video a thumbs up. thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more captivating stories. Your support means the world. Until next time. Have you ever felt the cold sting of being replaced? The humiliation of hearing the person you once loved, the person you built a life with, boast about how much better, how much more beautiful their new life is without you? For Alina Voss, this wasn't just a fear, it was happening right now in a ballroom filled with faces from her past. Her ex-husband Mark was holding court, painting a masterpiece of her replacement's perfection. He thought he had won. He thought she was broken. What he didn't know was that Alina wasn't arriving broken. She was arriving with a man whose name could bring titans of industry to a standstill, a man who didn't just see her worth. He treasured it. Get ready for a story of calmer self-love and the most satisfying entrance of all time. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, nestled between a utility bill and a catalogue for minimalist furniture. It was printed on thick cream-coloured cardstock, the kind that felt important, even before you read the words. The embossed crest of Northwood University gleamed under the recessed lighting of Alina Voss's home office. You are cordially invited to the 10-year reunion of the class of 2015. Alina ran a thumb over the raised lettering. 10 years. It felt like a lifetime ago, and simultaneously like yesterday. 10 years since she'd walked across that stage diploma in hand. Mark Peterson's arm wrapped securely around her waist. Back then, he was her entire world. They were the golden couple, the ones everyone expected to succeed. And they had for a time. They'd gotten married a year after graduation, bought a starter home in the suburbs, and fallen into a rhythm that from the outside looked like the American dream. But dreams can curdle. The reality had been far different. Mark's ambition wasn't about building a life together. It was about building a fashion. He craved the appearance of success. The right car, the right neighborhood, the right wife. Alina, with her quiet intelligence and fierce loyalty, had been the perfect supportive wife. She'd put her own career ambitions on hold, a fledgling graphic design business, to help him climb the corporate ladder at a mid-tier investment firm. She hosted his dinner parties, proofread his reports, and soothed his ego after every perceived slight at work. The cracks started small. A dismissive comment about her little hobby, a preference for her to wear certain clothes that better reflected his station, the slow, creeping realization that she wasn't his partner, she was his prettiest, most useful accessory. The final break came 3 years ago, a brutal, soul-crushing split. He'd called her unambitious, stagnant, and in a moment of pure cruelty, plain. He said he needed a woman who inspired him, someone who shined. 2 months later, he was with Tiffany. Alina knew of her only through the carefully curated lens of social media. Tiffany Sterling was by all accounts a goddess, a 20-something Instagram model with cascading blonde hair, impossibly blue eyes, and a body that defied nature. Her entire existence seemed to be a series of sun-drenched beaches, exclusive rooftop bars, and designer outfits. She was everything Mark had ever wanted in an accessory, shiny new and universally admired for her surface beauty. You're not actually thinking of going, are you? Alina looked up from the invitation. Her best friend and business partner, Chloe, was leaning against the doorframe of the office, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Chloe's sharp, no-nonsense attitude had been the anchor that kept Alina from drowning during the divorce. I don't know. Alina sighed, tossing the card onto her sleek, expansive desk. The desk, the office, the entire thriving business, Voss Creative, a boutique marketing agency that was now the go-to firm for luxury artisan brands, was a testament to how far she'd come. She wasn't that unambitious woman anymore. She had built this from the ashes of her old life. Ellie, why would you put yourself through that? It's a tank of sharks, and you know who the apex predator will be. Mark will be there, preening like a peacock with his child bride. He will make it his personal mission to humiliate you. He can't humiliate me, Alina said, though her voice lacked conviction. I'm not that person anymore. Logically, you know that. But emotionally, hearing him talk, seeing them together, it's a wound, Ellie. Why poke it? Chloe set a mug down in front of her. You're happy. Your business is killing it. You're with a man who worships the ground you walk on. You have nothing to prove. Ah, yes, the man. If Mark's new life was a public spectacle, Alina's was a private sanctuary. About a year ago, through a client introduction, she had met Julian Devereaux. On paper, he was a terrifyingly impressive figure. The self-made CEO and founder of Ethelred Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar tech and private equity firm. He was a visionary, a name whispered with reverence in boardrooms across the globe. In person, he was just Julian. He was quiet where Mark was loud. He listened more than he spoke. He had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and a deep, soothing voice that could calm the most frantic of her anxieties. He wasn't attracted to the version of Elina she thought a man like him would want. He was fascinated by her mind, her creativity, her resilience. He would spend hours in her studio, watching her work, utterly captivated. He loved the way she fiercely negotiated a contract, the way she could distill a brand's entire essence into a single image. He loved her without makeup in her old paint-stained sweatshirt. He loved her, not the idea of her. Their relationship was the one thing she kept fiercely private. In a world of oversharing, it was hers. No social media posts, no red carpet events, unless absolutely necessary. The press knew he was in a relationship, but the identity of the woman was a closely guarded secret. It was a stark contrast to Mark, whose Instagram was a shrine to his relationship with Tiffany. Later that evening, curled up on the sofa in the living room of Julian's stunning penthouse overlooking Central Park, the invitation lay on the coffee table between them. Rain pattered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights blurring into a watercolor painting. Julian picked up the card, his long fingers tracing the crest. He was dressed in a simple grey cashmere sweater and dark trousers, the picture of understated elegance. Northwood. That's where you studied, isn't it? Mm-hmm, Alina murmured, leaning her head against his shoulder. A decade ago. He read the details, his expression neutral. Are you going? Chloe thinks it's a terrible idea. A tank of sharks was her exact phrase. And what do you think? He asked, his voice a low rumble. Elena hesitated. I think a part of me doesn't want to go because I'm scared. Scared of seeing him. Scared of how it will feel. And I hate that. I hate that after all this time, after everything I've built, he still has that tiny sliver of power over me. Julian was silent for a moment, processing her words. He didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. He simply understood. Then you should go, he said finally. Alina looked up at him, surprised. Really? You think so? Yes, he said, turning to face her fully, his gaze intense and unwavering. You aren't the woman you were 3 years ago. Elina, you aren't even the woman you were 3 months ago. You are the founder and creative director of one of the most respected agencies in your field. You are brilliant, you are strong, and you are the most captivating woman I have ever known. You are not going there for him. You are going there for yourself, to show that timid girl from 10 years ago who she was always meant to become. He paused, a gentle smile playing on his lips. And besides, I haven't been to a university reunion before. It might be fun. Wait, you'd come with me. The thought hadn't even occurred to her. Julian Devereaux at her college reunion. It seemed surreal. Of course, he said as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I have a board meeting in Geneva that week, but I can fly back on Saturday. I'll be your date. He then added, with a twinkle in his eye, though I may have to rent a tuxedo that doesn't look like it costs more than the university's endowment. I want to make a good impression. Elena laughed, a genuine, bubbling sound of relief and affection. The fear that had been coiled in her stomach began to loosen. Maybe Chloe was wrong. Maybe this wasn't about poking an old wound. Maybe it was about finally definitively letting it heal. With Julian by her side, the tank of sharks seemed a lot less intimidating. It was just a party after all. A party where she could finally close a chapter of her life, not with bitterness, but with the quiet, unshakable confidence of a woman who knew her own worth. She picked up her phone and RSVP'd. Elena Voss, Place 1. The Grand Astoria Hotel ballroom was a symphony of gold and crystal. Chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, casting a warm, buttery glow over the 200 or so people milling about. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, the murmur of forced laughter, and the clinking of champagne flutes. It was exactly as pretentious as Alina remembered college functions, being only now everyone was older, carrying the subtle and sometimes not so subtle weight of a decade in the real world. Alina had arrived alone. Julian's flight from Geneva had been slightly delayed, but he'd messaged her, promising to be there within the hour. Make a grand entrance without me. He'd texted, followed by a winking emoji. Stun them all. I'll be there to pick up the pieces. She'd chosen her armor carefully, a sophisticated, deep sapphire cocktail dress that was elegant rather than flashy. It highlighted her figure without screaming for attention. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and her makeup was understated. She didn't want to look like she was trying too hard. She just wanted to look like herself, but the best version of it. For the first 20 minutes, it was manageable. She exchanged pleasantries with a few familiar faces, people who knew her as Elena, not Mark's ex-wife. They complimented her on her business, having seen a recent feature in a design magazine. It was pleasant, civilized, and then she saw him. Mark Peterson hadn't just entered the room, he'd made an entrance. He was positioned near the main bar, the strategic center of the room's social gravity. He was louder than she remembered his laughter, a booming performance. He wore a suit that was just a little too tight, a watch that was just a little too big. He was surrounded by a small group of their old university friends, mostly the jocks and business track guys he used to run with. And clinging to his arm was Tiffany. In person, she was even more striking than her photos. Impossibly tall, with a mane of platinum blonde hair that seemed to catch every shard of light from the chandeliers. She was poured into a glittering, backless gold dress that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. She looked less like a person and more like a concept, the physical embodiment of male fantasy. She smiled and nodded as Mark spoke, but her eyes had a slightly vacant quality, as if she were posing for a photo no one was taking. Elina instinctively moved behind a large floral arrangement, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. Chloe's voice echoed in her head, a tank of sharks. She couldn't hear the exact words, but she could see the pantomime. Mark was holding court. He would say something, then gesture expansively toward Tiffany, who would offer a dazzling, practiced smile. The men around him would chuckle and nod appreciatively, their eyes flicking over Tiffany like they were appraising a sports car. Driven by a morbid curiosity she couldn't suppress, Elena edged closer, pretending to be examining the canapes on a nearby table. Now she could hear him. And honestly, guys, it's just on another level, Mark was saying, his voice oozing with smug satisfaction. He took a loud sip of his champagne. I mean, you know how it is. You think you're happy. You think you've got it good. But then you meet someone like Tiff and you realize what you've been missing. It's like going from a black and white TV to 8K Ultra D. A few of the men chuckled uncomfortably. One of them, a guy named Kevin, glanced nervously in Alina's direction, but she quickly looked down at a plate of miniature quiches. She's a stunner, Mark. For sure, another man, David, chimed in. Stunner, Mark scoffed, draping his arm more firmly around Tiffany's waist. That's an understatement. Look at her. She's perfect. And the best part, no baggage, no drama, just pure sunshine. He lowered his voice conspiratorially, but it was still loud enough for Elena to hear every venomous word. My life with Alina? God, it was so beige. Everything was a negotiation, a chore. She was always so serious, so focused on her little projects. I needed someone who inspires me to live, you know, someone with real beauty inside and out. He squeezed Tiffany's side. Tell them what you were shooting last week, babe. Tiffany smiled vaguely. Oh, just a swimwear campaign in the Maldives. It was nice, nice. It was incredible, Mark boomed. They flew her first class. The resort was insane. That's the kind of life we're living now. No limits. Each word was a perfectly aimed dart, and despite her best efforts, Alina felt them land. Beige. Serious. Little projects. He was deliberately, cruelly rewriting their history, painting her as a drab, ambitionless ball and chain he had heroically unshackled himself from. The little project he was dismissing was the very business that afforded her a life he could only dream of. The seriousness he mocked was the focus and determination that had made her a success. She felt a hot flush of shame and anger creep up her neck. It was so much worse than she had imagined. He wasn't just boasting about his new fiancée. He was using that boast as a weapon to retroactively diminish Alina's entire existence. He was performing for an audience trying to solidify his narrative. I won. I upgraded. My life is better because she is no longer in it. She saw Kevin catch her eye again, this time with a look of genuine pity. That was almost worse. She didn't want pity. She wanted to be invisible. She wanted the marble floor to swallow her whole. She wanted Julian to be there, not to fight her battles, but just to stand beside her, a silent testament that Mark's version of reality was not the truth. Tiffany, for her part, seemed faintly uncomfortable with the specifics of Mark's monologue. When he'd called Alina beige, a flicker of something, empathy, awkwardness crossed her face, before being replaced by her default placid smile. She was a prop in his one-man show, and it seemed like she was only just beginning to realize it. Anyway, Mark concluded, raising his glass. To new beginnings, and to finding a woman who actually looks good in a bikini. The laughter from the group was strained this time. The cruelty was too overt, too pathetic. Mark seemed to sense he'd gone too far and tried to pivot. So Dave, how's the new job at Barclays treating you? Elina couldn't listen anymore. She turned and walked away, her movements stiff. She headed for the terrace doors, needing fresh air, needing to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the ballroom. Her hands were trembling. Her carefully constructed confidence felt like it was crumbling into dust. He had done it. He had managed to humiliate her. For a fleeting, painful moment, she felt small again. She felt beige. She pushed the heavy glass door open and stepped out into the cool night air, leaning against the stone balustrade. The city hummed below, oblivious. She took a deep, shaky breath, fighting back the tears that pricked at the corners of her eyes. She would not cry. She would not give him that satisfaction. She just needed a moment to reassemble her armor. She was staring out at the skyline when a warm, familiar hand gently touched her back. Everything all right, my love? She turned, and all the air left her lungs. It was Julian. He was here. He looked impossibly handsome in a perfectly tailored dark navy tuxedo. His white shirt crisp, a simple black bow tie at his neck. He wasn't wearing the flashiest suit or the biggest watch. He didn't need to. He radiated a quiet, unshakable confidence that made Mark's performative arrogance look like a child's tantrum. His brow was furrowed with concern as he took in her expression. What happened? He asked, his voice low and gentle. Elina opened her mouth to speak, but all that came out was a choked sob she could no longer contain. Julian immediately wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into a firm, safe embrace. He didn't say anything, just held her, stroking her hair as she buried her face in his chest, the scent of his cologne sandalwood and bergamot, a comforting anchor in the storm of her emotions. He's an idiot, Alina. Julian murmured into her hair after a moment. A small, insecure man. Whatever he said has no reflection on you. It is a reflection of his own inadequacy. She pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. How did you know he said something? A wry, knowing smile touched Julian's lips. I saw his performance on my way in. The loud laughing, the grand gestures. Men like that are a caricature. They only broadcast their insecurities so loudly when they feel threatened. He gently brushed a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb. Are you ready to go back in? I don't know, she whispered. I feel so foolish. You have nothing to feel foolish about, he said, his voice firm but kind. He offered her his arm. Let's go back in. We won't be staying long. We'll have one drink. You will hold your head high, and we will let them see the magnificent woman I have the honor of being with. Not for them, for you. Alina looked at him, at this incredible, kind, perceptive man who saw all of her and cherished it. She took a deep breath, the cool air steadying her nerves. She nodded, a new resolve hardening within her. He was right. This wasn't about Mark anymore. This was about her. She took his arm. Okay, she said, her voice stronger now. Let's go have that drink. Together they turned and walked back toward the ballroom doors. They weren't just going back to a party. They were walking into the lion's den. But this time, Alina wasn't alone. And she wasn't prey. The transition from the relative quiet of the terrace to the cacophony of the ballroom was jarring. But this time, Alina didn't flinch. Julian's arm was a steady, solid presence linked with hers. His warmth seemed to radiate through her, a shield against the judging eyes and whispered conversations. As they stepped through the doors, she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. The effect of their entrance was not immediate and explosive, but a slow rolling wave of realization that washed across the room. It started with a woman near the door, a former sorority sister named Jessica, whose eyes widened almost comically. She recognized Alina first, then her gaze shifted to the man beside her. A flicker of confusion crossed her face, then dawning recognition. Jessica grabbed her husband's arm, whispering urgently. He followed her gaze and his jaw went slack. This small ripple spread outwards. Heads began to turn. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. The general hum of the room dipped in volume as more and more people noticed the couple who had just entered. It wasn't just that Alina was with a handsome, impeccably dressed man. It was the man himself. Julian Devereux was not a celebrity in the traditional sense, but in the circles of finance, tech, and high society circles that many in this room aspired to, he was a legend. His face wasn't on tabloid covers, but it was on the cover of Forbes, The Economist, and the Wall Street Journal. He was a man who moved markets with a single press release, whose company, Ethelred Holdings, was a behemoth that acquired and reshaped entire industries. Whispers started to fly quickly, morphing from, "Who is that with Elena Voss?" to, "Is that? No, it can't be," to, "Oh my God, that's Julian Devereux." The entire social dynamic of the room began to pivot like a compass needle, swinging violently towards a new magnetic north. The center of gravity was no longer the bar where Mark Peterson was holding court. It was now the couple standing serenely by the entrance. Unaware, or perhaps simply unconcerned by the stir they were causing, Julian guided Alina toward a less crowded corner of the room. "Can I get you some champagne?" he asked, softly, his focus entirely on her. "Yes, please," she murmured, a small, genuine smile finally reaching her lips. The looks on people's faces were a potent antidote to the humiliation she had felt just minutes before. It wasn't about the status or the money, but about the sheer undeniable proof that Mark's narrative about her was a pathetic lie. As Julian made his way to the bar, the crowd parted for him, with a deference they hadn't shown anyone else all night. Alina watched as people, who had barely given her a second glance earlier, now shot her looks of awe, curiosity, and envy. From across the room, Mark had noticed the shift. He stopped mid-sentence, his story about Dave's job at Barclays forgotten. He saw the heads turning, the whispering, and he followed their collective gaze. He saw Elena, and then he saw the man walking away from her toward the bar. His first reaction was a sneer. So she brought a date, he thought. Probably some artsy guy from her little company. He watched as the man, tall and poised, effortlessly procured 2 glasses of champagne, nodding politely to the bartender. Mark squinted, a flicker of unease in his gut. There was something familiar about him, but he couldn't place it. Tiffany, sensing his attention, had shifted, turned as well. "Who's that?" she asked, her voice neutral. "Looks like my ex finally scraped a date together," Mark said dismissively, though his eyes remained fixed on the scene. "Probably trying to make me jealous. It's a bit sad, really." But the people around Mark weren't listening to him anymore. They were all looking at the same thing. Holy crap. Kevin, the friend who had looked at Alina with pity, breathed out. "Is that who I think it is?" "Who?" Mark asked, his irritation growing. "Devereaux." Another man, a portfolio manager named Scott, whispered, his voice tinged with reverence. "Julian Devereaux, of Ethelred Holdings." The name hit Mark like a physical blow. He felt the blood drain from his face. Julian Devereaux. The Julian Devereaux. It was impossible. He was one of the most powerful men in the world. What would a man like that be doing here at a Northwood University reunion? And with Alina, Mark's mind raced, trying to compute the information. His firm, Stratford and Finch, had been desperately trying to get a meeting with Ethelred's acquisitions department for 6 months. They were a minnow trying to get the attention of a blue whale. Mark had sat in on meetings where his managing director spoke of Devereaux as if he were a mythical creature, a king from a distant land, and he was here with his beige ex-wife. Julian returned to Alina's side, handing her a flute of champagne. He leaned in and murmured something in her ear, and she laughed, a real vibrant laugh that lit up her entire face. It was a look of pure, unadulterated happiness. A look Mark hadn't seen on her face in years, and one he now realized, with a sickening jolt, he had never truly been able to inspire. The sight of them together was jarring. They looked right. Alina's sapphire dress complemented Julian's navy tuxedo. Her quiet grace was a perfect match for his commanding stillness. They weren't a mismatched couple thrown together for an event. They looked like a power couple, but a power couple at ease in their own private world amidst the chaos of the party. The narrative Mark had so carefully constructed, the one where he had upgraded to a life of sunshine and beauty, lay in smoking ruins at his feet. In the space of 5 minutes, he had gone from being the center of attention to a footnote. His loud boasts now echoed in his own mind, sounding pathetic and hollow. Bragging about a first-class flight to the Maldives in front of a man who likely owned the jet, and possibly the island was a new level of social suicide. Tiffany watched the color drain from Mark's face. She followed his stunned gaze back to Alina and the man beside her. She didn't know the name Julian Devereaux, but she was an expert in reading social cues. She understood power dynamics, influence, and status. She could see the deference in the way people looked at him. She could feel the magnetic pull he exerted on the room without even trying, and she could see the way he looked at Alina, not like a trophy to be shown off, but like a treasure to be cherished. It was a look she had always craved from Mark, but had never received. "Mark," she asked, her voice small, "who is that man?" Mark swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. He couldn't tear his eyes away from Alina and Julian. He saw them clink their glasses together, a private, intimate toast. His world, which had felt so shiny and impressive just moments ago, now felt cheap, flimsy, and fake. "Nobody," he choked out, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. "He's nobody." But it was too late. The truth was already loose in the room, and it was heading directly for him. For a few minutes, an invisible barrier seemed to exist around Alina and Julian. People looked, whispered, and pointed, but no one dared to approach. It was as if they were encased in an aura of untouchable prestige. Alina, sipping her champagne, felt a strange sense of calm. The power in the room had shifted so completely that she was no longer a participant in the drama, but an observer. The first person to breach the barrier was an old professor, Dr. Albright, a man Elena had always admired. He approached them not with the fawning curiosity of the others, but with genuine warmth. Elena Voss, I was so pleased to read about your agency's success, he said, his eyes twinkling. I always knew that sharp mind of yours was destined for more than just lecture halls. Dr. Albright, it's so good to see you, Elena, said her smile genuine. This is my fiancé, Julian. A pleasure, Julian said, shaking the professor's hand firmly. Elena has spoken very highly of your mentorship. The use of the word fiancé was deliberate. They'd gotten engaged quietly a month ago, sharing the news only with their closest circle. Announcing it here and now felt right. It wasn't a strategic move, but a simple statement of fact that in this context carried the weight of a royal decree. The word hung in the air, and Elena could almost feel the shockwave it sent through the nearby listeners. As Dr. Albright moved on, the spell was broken. A few other brave souls, former classmates, who now worked in finance and tech, and recognized the immense networking opportunity, approached their introductions to Julian fawning and sycophantic. Julian was polite but brief, his attention always returning to Elena, making it clear that he was here with her, not as a guest of honor to be courted. And then Mark approached. He moved toward them, like a man walking to his own execution. His earlier swagger was gone, replaced by a stiff, awkward gait. Tiffany trailed a few steps behind him, her expression a mixture of apprehension and morbid curiosity. The small crowd around Mark had abandoned him, leaving him isolated. He had no choice but to confront the new center of the universe. Elena. He said, his voice strained. He tried for a casual tone, but it came out tight and unnatural. Fancy seeing you here, Mark. Elena replied, her voice even and cool. She didn't offer a smile. She simply acknowledged him. She was no longer intimidated. Looking at him now, she saw him for what he was, a man terrified of being seen as small. Mark's eyes darted from Elena to Julian, a flicker of disbelief still warring with the horrifying reality. He gestured awkwardly toward Tiffany. You've met my fiancée, Tiffany, he said the word fiancée, now sounding like a pathetic echo of Elena's. Tiffany offered a small, hesitant wave. It's a pleasure, Julian said, his voice smooth as silk. His gaze was polite, but his eyes were extraordinarily perceptive. It was the kind of look that made people feel like he was seeing right through them to the very core of their intentions. And this is, Elena began, but Mark cut her off, extending a hand to Julian with forced bravado. Mark Peterson, Stratford and Finch, he said, name-dropping his firm as if it held any weight in this context. Good to meet you. Didn't catch your name. It was a desperate last-ditch attempt to pretend he didn't know who Julian was, to reclaim some semblance of control. Julian took his hand. His grip was firm, effortless. Julian Devereux, he said, his tone neutral. He didn't add his company name. He didn't have to. The confirmation of the name spoken aloud seemed to suck the air out of Mark's lungs. His face, already pale, went ashen. He had been holding onto a sliver of hope that everyone was mistaken. That hope was now gone. Devereux. Mark repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Of course, Ethelred Holdings. We at Stratford and Finch are huge admirers of your work. Huge admirers. His sycophantic fawning was a stark, humiliating contrast to his earlier boasts. Julian gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, his expression unreadable. I'm glad our work is appreciated. An excruciatingly awkward silence fell over the small group. Mark's mind was a frantic mess. This was the man his company had been chasing for months. He had just spent the last half hour indirectly and directly insulting the man's fiancée. The fiancée who was also his own ex-wife. The potential for professional and personal fallout was catastrophic. He had to say something. He had to fix it. So Mark began turning to Alina with a wide, fake smile. "This is a surprise. You and Mr. Devereaux. How did you two even meet?" The question was laced with an unspoken insinuation. How did someone like you land someone like him? Before Alina could answer, Julian did his voice calm and deliberate, each word chosen with surgical precision. "I was fortunate enough to be introduced to Alina through a business associate. I was looking for a marketing firm to rebrand a heritage luxury brand my company had recently acquired. I was told Voss Creative was the best in the business. After meeting Alina and seeing her portfolio, I concluded that was an understatement." He turned his gaze to Alina, and the cool politeness he'd shown Mark melted away, replaced by genuine warmth and admiration. Her insight into brand narrative is extraordinary. She possesses a rare combination of artistic creativity and strategic acumen. She's a formidable talent. The compliment was so specific, so professional, and so glowing that it served as a devastating rebuttal to Mark's earlier dismissal of her little projects. He hadn't just praised her, he had endorsed her professional genius in front of the man who had called her unambitious. Mark looked like he'd been punched in the gut. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. What could he possibly say? Tiffany was watching this exchange with wide, intelligent eyes. She wasn't just a beautiful face. She was seeing the entire dynamic laid bare. She saw the way Julian spoke of Alina with a deep, authentic respect that Mark had never once shown her. Mark praised her body, her face, her ability to look good in a photo. Julian praised Alina's mind, her talent, her work. In that moment, Tiffany saw the vast, cavernous difference between being a trophy and being a partner. And she saw with dawning horror that Mark had positioned her firmly as the former. Trying to salvage the train wreck, Mark cleared his throat and made one last fatal error. He turned to Julian man to man as if trying to find common ground. "Well, you know how it is," he said, with a weak, conspiratorial chuckle. "It's important to have a partner who complements your lifestyle. My Tiff here. She's a breath of fresh air. Keeps things light, you know. No heavy business talk at home." It was meant to be a subtle dig at Alina, a final attempt to frame her as the serious and beige one. But it backfired spectacularly. Julian's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. A chill entered his voice. "On the contrary, Mr. Peterson," he said, his tone dropping to a level of quiet intensity that was more intimidating than any shout. "I find a partner who can challenge me intellectually to be the greatest asset in my life. The conversations Alina and I have about her business, about my business, about the world, they are the highlight of my day. A beautiful mind is a far rarer and more valuable commodity than a beautiful face, though I'm fortunate enough to have a fiancé who possesses both in abundance." He delivered the final line while looking directly at Alina with a loving smile, completely dismissing Tiffany, not out of malice toward her, but to utterly invalidate Mark's shallow comparison. It was a kill shot. In one smooth, devastating monologue, Julian had championed Alina's intellect, validated her career, announced their engagement, and exposed Mark's values as laughably superficial. Mark stood there, speechless and broken. He had been so obsessed with winning the narrative of their divorce, so desperate to prove he had upgraded, that he had walked blindly into his own public execution. The king of his small imaginary castle had just been effortlessly dethroned by a true emperor who had shown up simply to support the woman he loved. Alina felt a final cleansing wave of release. All the lingering pain, the sting of his past words, the residue of his cruelty, it all vanished. She wasn't happy because he was humiliated. She was happy because she was free. His opinion no longer mattered. His words had no power. He was just a ghost from a past life, and she was very much living in the present. "If you'll excuse us," Julian said smoothly, placing a guiding hand on the small of Alina's back. I believe we promised some old friends a dance. He guided her away, leaving Mark standing in the middle of the room with Tiffany, the silence between them as vast and cold as the Arctic. The show was over, and everyone knew who had taken the final bow. As Julian led Alina toward the dance floor, it felt as though they were moving through water. The crowd parted, and the whispers followed them, no longer just about Julian's identity, but about the brutal, elegant dismantling of Mark Peterson that had just occurred. Alina felt light, almost giddy. The band was playing a slow classic Sinatra tune. Julian took her in his arms, his hand resting gently on her waist, the other holding hers. They moved together effortlessly, two people perfectly in sync. "Are you okay?" he murmured, his lips close to her ear, his voice for her alone. "I'm better than okay," she whispered back, resting her head on his shoulder. "I feel clear. For the first time. Thank you." "I didn't do anything," he said. "I just told the truth. His reaction is his own to deal with. You did everything she insisted. You showed me the truth, that my value isn't something he gets to define." They danced in comfortable silence for a while, the chaos of the room fading into a pleasant blur. The night was no longer about Mark or the reunion. It was about them. It was a celebration of the life she had built, and the man who had entered it, not as a savior, but as a partner who saw her for exactly who she was. Across the room, the scene was far less serene. Mark and Tiffany were still standing in the same spot, frozen in a tableau of humiliation. The space around them felt toxic, and no one approached. Finally, Tiffany turned to him, her face a mask of cold fury. "Don't you ever," she said, her voice low and trembling, "ever use me as a prop like that again." "Tiff, baby, I don't know what you're talking about," Mark stammered, trying to take her arm. She snatched it away. "Don't you dare. Keeps things light. No heavy business talk. You made me sound like an idiot, like a beautiful, brainless doll you keep around for decoration. You weren't complimenting me, Mark. You were using my appearance to insult your ex-wife, and you ended up humiliating us both. I was just trying to... To what? Win, she shot back, her blue eyes flashing with an intelligence he had never bothered to look for. Look around. Do you think you won that man, that Julian Devereaux? He didn't even have to raise his voice. He destroyed you with a compliment to her. He respects her mind, her work. What do you respect about me, Mark? My waist-to-hip ratio. The way I look in a bikini. The words he had used so cruelly against Alina were now being thrown back in his face. He stared at her, dumbfounded. He had never seen this side of her. He had chosen her because he thought she was simple, uncomplicated. He was discovering far too late that there was a sharp, perceptive mind behind the perfect face, a mind that was now pointed directly at him. "That's not fair," he mumbled. "Isn't it?" Tiffany gave a short, bitter laugh. "You wanted a woman who shined. You know what I think? You just wanted a woman who was bright enough to blind people so they wouldn't see how small you really are." Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked away, not toward the exit, but toward a group of women she knew from the industry, leaving Mark utterly alone in the middle of the floor. His reign as the center of attention had lasted all of 30 minutes. Now he was a social pariah, a cautionary tale whispered about over champagne. As Alina and Julian finished their dance, a familiar face approached them. It was Ben Carter, a quiet, kind guy from their literature program, who had become a successful novelist. He'd always been an observer, someone who saw more than he said. "Alina," he said with a warm smile, "it's good to see you looking so happy." "Truly." "Ben, it's great to see you too. This is my fiancé, Julian." They shook hands, and Ben's gaze was one of genuine respect, not awe. "It's an honor, Mr. Devereaux. I have to say, that was quite a moment back there. Mark hasn't changed a bit." "You knew him well?" Julian asked, his curiosity piqued. Ben chuckled grimly. "We were roommates for a semester. Let me tell you something. Alina probably never knew. Mark's obsession with appearances. It's not new. His father was exactly the same. Cut him off financially for a year because Mark's first serious girlfriend in college wasn't from the right family. He's been chasing external validation his whole life. His relationships, his job, his car, they're not for him. They're props for a play he's performing for an audience that doesn't even care. Ben looked at Alina kindly. When he got together with you, we all thought he'd finally grown up. You were brilliant, grounded. We thought you'd be the one to make him a real person. But I guess in the end, he couldn't handle being with someone whose light was their own. He needed someone whose light he could control. The revelation settled over Alina, not with a shock, but with a profound sense of clarity. It all made sense. The constant need for praise, the obsession with what the neighbors thought, the way he'd belittled her ambitions once they started to become real. It wasn't about her at all. It was never about her. It was about his own deep-seated generational insecurity. He hadn't fallen out of love with her. He had been terrified by her potential. She felt a strange, unexpected pang of pity for him. Not forgiveness, but a sad, detached understanding of his own gilded cage. "Thank you for telling me that, Ben," she said softly. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Ellie," he said, using her old nickname. "Looks like you found it." He smiled at them both and moved on, leaving Alina and Julian in their own quiet bubble once more. The final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. The wound wasn't just healed, the scar had vanished. Julian squeezed her hand. Ready to leave, Alina looked across the room one last time. She saw Mark standing alone by the bar, nursing a drink, avoiding eye contact with everyone. She saw Tiffany laughing with her friends, vibrant and alive now that she was out of Mark's shadow. She had come here fearing a confrontation, an emotional battle. She was leaving with something far more valuable: closure. "Yes," she said, turning her back on the ballroom and all its ghosts. "Let's go home." As they walked out of the hotel, leaving the noise and the drama behind them, the cool night air felt clean and new. They didn't speak of Mark again. There was no need. His chapter was over, the book firmly closed. The future, a story they were writing together, was waiting for them. The fallout from the reunion was not loud and explosive, but a series of quiet, definitive shifts. News, especially of the juicy, karmic variety, travels fast. Within days, the story of the showdown at the Astoria had become a piece of gossip whispered in certain social and professional circles in New York. The narrative was always the same. Mark Peterson, the arrogant investment banker, had tried to humiliate his brilliant ex-wife, only to be effortlessly put in his place by her billionaire fiancé, the legendary Julian Devereaux. For Mark, the consequences were very real. His managing director at Stratford and Finch, a man named Gerald Crane, got wind of the story through a colleague who had been at the reunion. Crane was apoplectic. "Are you an idiot, Peterson?" Crane had barked at him in a closed-door meeting, his face purple with rage. "We have been trying to get a foot in the door with Ethelred Holdings for the better part of a year. We are currently trying to court an investment from their venture capital arm for the new tech fund. Their CEO is Julian Devereaux, and you, in your infinite wisdom, decided it was a good idea to publicly insult his fiancée." "I didn't know it was him," Mark protested weakly. "It doesn't matter." Crane slammed his hand on the desk. "What matters is your complete lack of judgment, discretion, and basic human decency. You not only embarrassed yourself, you made this entire firm look amateurish and foolish. You are a liability." Mark was taken off the tech fund project immediately. He was sidelined, relegated to menial back-office work. The promotion he had been so sure was his was given to someone else. He was professionally neutered, his ladder-climbing ambitions cut off at the knees. The facade of success he had worked so hard to build had been shattered by his own insecurity. Tiffany Sterling did not go back to Mark. The reunion had been a brutally effective wake-up call. She realized she had been so enamored with the idea of the life Mark promised, the glamorous, successful power couple, that she had ignored the glaring reality he didn't see her as a person. 2 days after the reunion, she had her things moved out of his apartment. She posted a single cryptic message on her Instagram story, a picture of a sunrise with the caption, "Never let anyone else's shadow block your sun." Her millions of followers didn't know the context, but for her, it was a declaration of independence. She started taking acting classes using her platform to talk about self-worth beyond aesthetics, and began to build a brand based on something more substantial than just a pretty picture. For Elena, life simply continued, but it was different. A weight she hadn't even fully realized she was carrying had been lifted. The ghost of her past marriage no longer haunted the corners of her mind. A week after the reunion, she and Julian were having breakfast on the sun-drenched terrace of his penthouse. The city was spread out before them, a kingdom of possibilities. The feature story on Voss Creative had led to a flood of new high-profile inquiries. Her business was about to expand in ways she had only dreamed of. She was scrolling through a design brief on her tablet when Julian slid a small velvet box across the table. It was not a ring box. Confused, she looked at him. "This is not a second engagement ring, I promise," he said with a smile. She opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a beautiful custom-made fountain pen. It was crafted from a deep sapphire resin that matched her dress, from the reunion with a solid platinum nib and a simple, elegant clip. Engraved along the side in delicate script were the words, "Scribe of your own story." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. It was the most thoughtful, most perfect gift she had ever received. It wasn't about wealth or status. It was about him seeing her, truly seeing her. He understood that her greatest power, her greatest joy, came from her ability to create, to write narratives for her brands and for herself. "Julian," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You've closed a chapter, Elena," he said softly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "A story someone else tried to write for you. Now you get to write all the rest. And I cannot wait to read every single word." Elena looked from the pen to the face of the man she loved. A man whose strength wasn't in his bank account or his reputation, but in his quiet confidence, his profound kindness, and his unwavering belief in her. She thought of Mark, a man so consumed with crafting a perfect image that he had destroyed his own reality. She thought of Tiffany, a woman finding her own voice after being used as a beautiful mouthpiece. And she thought of herself, the beige woman who had built a world of vibrant color, the woman with little projects who was now a titan in her own industry, the woman who had walked into a tank of sharks and walked out without a single bite, not because of the powerful man on her arm, but because she had finally completely realized she was not food. She was the ocean. She picked up the pen. It felt balanced, perfect in her hand. She smiled, a real radiant smile that held all the promise of a new dawn. The best stories she knew were not about revenge. They were about redemption. And her story was just getting started. And so, Elena's story wasn't about the spectacular fall of her ex-husband, but about her own quiet, magnificent rise. It's a powerful reminder that the ultimate victory isn't about proving your worth to those who doubted you. It's about building a life where their opinion is completely irrelevant. True value isn't loud, boastful, or covered in glitter. It's found in quiet confidence, authentic partnership, and the courage to write your own narrative, no matter who tries to edit your pages. Karma, in the end, isn't always a storm. Sometimes it's the peaceful, sunlit morning after you've finally closed the door on the past. What did you think of Elena's journey? Have you ever had a moment where you realized you were finally free from a past hurt? Share your stories and thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life drama and empowering stories. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening.